All right, so I was watching Brian's Man Cave last night. I don't know if y'all follow him, but he put a video out about are we retro gamers, something like that. I've been talking about the Odyssey 2 a lot, and I've been posting some videos on that Freedom Fighters. So I wanted to change the topic a little here. I'm going to do a video on that later. But what I wanted to talk about, something that dawned on me. So did expensive electronics, video game systems, boom boxes, radios, race tracks, I don't know, all the shit that we used to get as kids. Did expensive electronics, change who we are? What I mean by that is, let's take it back here. Let's take it back to the late 70s, early 80s. Before that, I remember growing up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and we used to live on a side street, and the streets was filled with kids playing stickball, football, kickball, whatever have you. We used to ride bikes, and this was before electronics got into our households. So what I'm saying is there was a lot of outside playing as kids. Then when the early 80s came around and we moved to a town, when we first moved into this town, it was pretty much the same. Everyone was outside, riding bikes. It all started with these little tape recorders. They were cheap, and I'm not sure how expensive they were in today's money. But you know those little tape recorders. I remember riding our bikes and taking a little tape recorder with us and playing cassettes like AC/DC, Jay Giles Band, stuff like that, Van Halen, and those were fairly cheap. So your mother had one, and you grabbed it. You could play cassettes. They weren't loud or anything, but they played the music. But what I'm saying now is my first video game system was the Odyssey 2, right? And, I'm like a lot of my mother's friends, kids, sons, when my mom would go take me to one of her friends' house and they had a kid about my age, whether it was a cousin or just a friend of my mom's, but let's say, I'm not gonna mention any names, but like one of my mother's friends, his sons had an Atari 2600. So when we used to go there, say it was around Christmas time, maybe a little after Christmas, maybe had just gotten it. Now let's not forget, something like an Atari 2600, you're talking big money. Cartridges, the games were, I don't know, at first they were like $30, $40, $50. I'm not sure, around there. The system itself was like $200, $300. In today's time, that would be, equivalent to, maybe a PlayStation 5 or whatever. Now, though these electronics still work to this day, most of them, at the time, you got to remember, parents, and then I don't know if kids were doing extra chores or doing extra begging or being extra good to get something like an Atari 2600 or an Intellivision or whatever at the time. But y'all got to remember, these things were made out of plastic. And electronic, input, where you put the cartridge in, this was electronics. You couldn't get liquid in there. You couldn't, bang them around too much. I mean, there was no online returning and repair centers so what I'm saying is, did we become who we are as far as, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but like a lot of the YouTubers you might watch, like say Brett Weiss, Brian's Man Cave, DJC, I'm just naming people that my viewers might know. Papa Pete, Go Gamer, just to name a few. Back in the day Gamer, just to name a few, Atari Creep and whatever, right? All right, so we all have these collections. We're still into the, what we were into 40 years ago. We brought it all full circle. Now, would you consider us as almost like loners in a way, as far as we all had friends, we all have friends, we all have family and stuff like that, but generally these people doing YouTube are doing it in their lone time, right? So some might be married, some might have families. What I'm getting at is, we pretty much roll as lone wolves. Does this have something to do with our growing up with electronics? Because what I'm trying to get at is, our parents back then, it was hard to talk our parents into getting us something like Atari or something, a boom box out of the Sears catalog or have you. I think that's what caused paper routes, kids doing paper routes and mowing lawns, and to get, sometimes your parents would match you, come up with half the money and I'll put in the other half. I mean, it was not like today. The electronics, our parents had to put food on the table. Our parents had to put, household equipment came first. So what I'm saying is, I've been putting these videos out of the Odyssey 2, and one of my little cousins, he's only a few years younger than me, but I text him and I said, I remember the Odyssey 2 I used to have back in the early 80s. He's like, no, I was never allowed to go in your room. It was always locked. So that brought me to this idea, because when we were kids, we had our rough relative or our rough friend down the street, our bully friend or whatever you want to call it. But like my next door neighbor, he had the ColecoVision. He later had the Nintendo, which I later had. He had an Atari 2600. His father was into like race car tracks, and I used to like those race car tracks too. I used to ask for those, the ones that you put together, Tyco or whatever have you, and you press the thing and the cars go around. Now all these things were built okay, but they were fragile, as far as if you were rough with them or got liquid on them, or a drink, spilled a drink, or so. With that said, now there's friends my mother used to take me to. I remember one time going there and seeing an Atari 2600 for the first time, and as kids, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you're trying to behave. Here you're at this guy's, this kid's house, and he's showing you his Atari 2600, and his mother is probably in the other room. I'll call you right back. I'll call you right back. All right, the mother's probably in the other room, cringing, like knowing how much she paid for this, and I hope they're, not being rough, and, they don't want to be rude and say you can't bring a drink in there or this and that. And as a kid, you don't realize, these things came in cardboard boxes, and they were plastic cartridges. And I don't know if you, as kids, we start throwing them around, play catch, spill a drink, and I don't know, So what I'm getting at is, I remember going there the first time. I'm not the first time, but when they had it, I got to show you something. It was like this thing, like he's probably dying to show somebody this thing, a friend, someone his age. He wants to show him this and play two players, because it did come with two joysticks. We all had the little sister that we used to try and beg to play with us. But they were, into their dolls and Barbie dolls, and, so whenever a friend like your age would come over, you'd want to show that, you'd want to show off your stuff and play two players. And so, to make a long story short, I used to remember doing this, and he had all the games, Space Invaders. They were, they weren't rich, but they were a little more wealthy than we were. So he had a Haunted House, Adventure, all them games, like everything. Pac-Man, he had all the games. Keystone Capers. I remember playing all them games. So I remember after that time, that first time he showed it, we played the system and we played the Atari, and we, for hours, as our parents were talking in the kitchen, having coffee and chatting. So now you don't know as a kid, when you leave and go home, the parents, were they like, what happened in there? Is there shit okay? Did anybody spill a drink? And who knows, a couple days later, the thing starts acting up, finicky. It could have been something else, but now they think, that had something to do with it. So now I remember going there the next few times, and whether the son wasn't home, or the bedroom door, I remember like, oh, he's not home, but I know he's got an Atari in there. So you try to go in the room, as your parents are talking with the parents in the kitchen, like before, but now all of a sudden he's not home for some reason. Maybe he's at a game, or he's at a friend's house, but now the door's locked. And I couldn't get in there to do what he showed me before. And then I remember going there a few more times when he was home, and he still tried to avoid going in there to play it. And he's like, and he would, suggest, let's go downstairs and play hide and seek, and go downstairs in the basement and play board games and stuff like that. So I remember the next several times we went there, I never got to play the Atari 2600 again. So I didn't think of this until now, later on, that maybe it was that first time we played it, we may have done something that showed, like next time they come over, do something else, lock up your room, because of the cost of these things, is what I'm getting at. So I remember finally getting my Odyssey 2. Now, I wasn't like that with my Odyssey 2, because the Odyssey 2, I used to play it a lot in the living room, and I would just hook it up temporarily to play. And those systems back then, they came with long wires to the TV, but short wires on the controllers. So they were made to hook up and put close to you. That's why they made the wires going to the TV long, super long, but the wires to the controllers were short. So they always wanted you to have plus the reset buttons and stuff were on the systems. So I wasn't like that, but later on, when I got the Nintendo, I started getting like that because now I started getting into my older teenage years, so I wasn't home a lot. So I would, in fact, lock my bedroom door to keep my sisters out because I had a expensive boom box at the time, and I didn't want my sister grabbing it and using it with her friends and getting makeup on it, or just getting something in the tape deck, or just chipping it, or cosmetically dropping it, or whatever. So, and I had several fights with my sister when I used to find out that she did sneak into my room. I think before I started locking my doors. And then whenever I wasn't home and my little cousins would show up, and it would be the other way around. I'd be the one that was out, and my mom would have my aunts over, and then my little cousins would come over, and they would go into my room, and I don't know if what they're doing while I'm not home. They're drinking something or spilling something, getting fingerprints all over everything. So now, in turn, I started locking my door to my bedroom. So I don't know if locking your bedroom door became a thing with these expensive electronics, is what I'm getting at. Because before that, no one locked their bedroom door, especially when you're a kid. So, did expensive electronics from the late 70s, early 80s, did that cause who we are today as far as, being lone wolves, locking up doors and trying to keep others away from our stuff? Was it because of the cost? Was it because it was so expensive and unreplaceable at the time? So I'm sure this happened with vinyl records. When a teenager started collecting vinyl records, those were very expensive as well. I mean, you wouldn't think they were at the time, but even if they were $3, $4, $5 a piece, that'd be like $15, $20 today. And if you had a whole collection of them, you didn't want your little cousin coming over and scratching them all up, and because he doesn't know how to use the the record player. So did old vintage electronics back in the day, expensive electronics, change who we are, change the way we did things and kept things? So I don't know. I thought that was an interesting little story. I don't know if y'all get it or not, depending how old you are. But that was the video I wanted to do real quick, just to change it up. Y'all let me know in the comments if you experienced any things like that. All right, y'all. I'll see you later.